Hey, Mike, what do Kelly Slater and PT have in common?
I don't know. They're both world champs?
Nope, they both own Endless Summer box set.
Oh my God, rad. You guys, you can get it too. The link's in the show notes.
Went down to Waimea Bay. What a fantastic sunny day. Boys and girls hanging round. Surfers going up and down. That's when I caught my wave. Knew what to do. Surf that wave right to the shore. And yes, dreams come true.
Hey everybody, welcome to the QuiverCast. I am Mike, your host. Let's get into the show. All right, everyone, welcome to the QuiverCast. We were stoked. Today, we have none other than Rusty Preisendorfer and his buddy, John Durant. How you doing, John? Did I say your name okay?
You said it better than most people. Better than I do. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Rusty. Thanks, John, for joining us.
It'll be fun.
John did a Surfer's Journal article. It was about a year ago, and we're working on a very nice coffee table book.
Okay.
It's about a 2 or 3 year process. So we meet a couple times a week, and he asks me questions. I can't. So I always have Google in front of me to help me remember my past. But anyway, shoot.
Let's start way back in your past. And it's kind of been well documented, but surfing, like, how did surfing get into your life?
Well, the very first time I went surfing, I was about 12 years old, I think. I lived in Serra Mesa. One of my best friends was Billy Page, and his father was, an American soldier, and his mother was Japanese. And she had a little phone book, a handwritten phone book, and I asked Billy, I go, "Where's my name?" And he goes, "Under L-S-T-Y, Lusty." But anyways, his father took us to the beach one day. I think it was like Mission Beach, probably low tide or whatever.
Yep.
And I was pushing the board out. I was in about waist deep water, not even waist deep. And, a wave came in and hit the board sideways, knocked me in the face. And I said, well, I didn't say fuck, but I would now. I said, fuck that. and so I didn't surf again until we moved to La Jolla, which was, beginning of 8th grade. And, I moved to La Jolla and we lived up above the shores. My father was a mathematician at Scripps, and he wanted to be able to walk to work. So, I started body surfing. I always like to make things with my hands and build things and stuff. So I want to learn how to fix dings, even though I still hadn't started surfing yet. And so I bought this old broken down board, a swap meet or someplace for $10, and was fixing things on it. And then it dawned on me that all the really cool guys were surfers.
Okay.
And so the very first board I surfed on was a Carl Ekstrom Asymmetrical. He had a shop down the shores at that time, and his wife was so cute. I used to hang out there just to stare at her. But it was a 9.3. I think it was about 21 and maybe a quarter, 21, and it was made for a regular foot. I had no idea what that was or what that meant.
Right.
And I rode it for, maybe 6-9 months. And then I got to order my first new board. And that was towards the end of summer in 1967. And that was a Miranda Brothers Surfboards La Jolla. It was a twin pin. It had 2 pintails. It was 810, 2 pintails, 2 fins, and it had a V coming off of each pintail that pointed towards the nose but died out around foot back from the center point. And I was torn because David Nuiva was like the hottest surfer at the time, and I think did he win the '66 World Championships, or that was that? Anyways,
yeah, I don't think he did.
And so I almost got a Bing Nuiva nose rider or featherweight or whatever, but all the good surfers in La Jolla were riding Miranda Brothers board, all the best surfers, and so I got one, and it was cool. I rode that for a year, and then next summer, this was 68. Late in 67 was kind of when the shortboard revolution really kicked in. And if you look at surf magazines in the early 68, and magazines were once every month, I think, bi-monthly. By the second issue of the surf magazines, there were shortboard ads, there were longboard ads. The next couple of issues, the longboards pretty much disappeared. And in the shops, it was the same thing. I think that's when Mitch opened. I went with the Miranda Brothers, and then my second board was next summer, but I had to pay for it myself. My parents didn't understand why I had to get a new board. Because at the time of the greatest change in, I think, surfing history, maybe. Longboards are gone. They're probably, they're pretty much dead.
I got a couple questions about that.
Yeah.
Where did all those longboards go? In people's garage, just sitting there, or were they chopped down?
Oh, maybe a handful are chopped down, but I think there's a lot of, very collectible boards rotting in people's garages.
Wow.
And there's certain surfers that like to ride the real old boards, or that's their shaping style. But my second twin pin was shorter, it was lighter, and I was getting better and better. I don't want to say it sucked because I have the utmost respect for the Miranda Brothers. They're both dead now. But Bear was a shaper and Nick was a glasser, but it wasn't that good. It went very slow and didn't really turn that well. But in the meantime, my first surf hero was Jock Sutherland, and eventually I got to meet him. Got some interesting stories about him. I could blather on here for hours, but
keep going.
But my next hero was Wayne Lynch, and
wow, yeah,
his movie Evolution came out, and it kind of told the story of the end of the longboard revolution. They were already on, maybe 6 double enders and stuff. And toward the last segment of Evolution is Wayne on a kind of a pointier nose board with more rocker. And he's at Margaret River doing, backlit waves, doing these beautiful off the tops. And I just thought, man, that guy's my hero. And he also was earlier in the movie, he's doing these straight up backside, gaffs and hooks. And so I just wanted to be like Wayne Lynch.
Is this all on the shore, or are you kind of going to the reefs? You're pretty young still.
Well, I mean, I have an interesting story. I surf La Jolla Shores, and Scripps once in a while. And the shores in the wintertime on a steep north swell, it can almost be like a point break, but it's a beach break, but it's a very well-defined right. And there was a day, it wasn't a big day, it was about head high, if I remember right. But the rights were firing, and I go, I'm going to learn how to go right.
Because you're a goofy foot.
Because I'm a goofy foot. I'm left-handed. I don't know why. I just ended up with my right foot forward.
Okay.
And so Tom Mortner, who was arguably one of the best surfers in town at that time, I kept paddling for waves. There was always somebody deeper than me, and I'd back out, and I said, fuck it, I'm going to the next wave. And I put my head down, I paddled, and I was like trying to turn, and somebody slammed into me, and I came up, and it was Tom Mortner, and he was looking me in the eyes, and he said, go in. I didn't say fuck you or anyway. He just said go in. And his board was next to him and my board was in. And so I swam in, with zero dignity. And I picked up my board. But, I'd only been out for about half an hour. And I looked north. Scripps looked okay. I started walking towards Scripps. And I looked farther north. And I thought I saw a pretty good left. Maybe, past the rocks and maybe a mile up the beach. So I walked and I got there. And that was my first session at Black's. Thank you, Tom. And it blew my mind. And from then on, most of the time I served Blacks. And, for those first couple of years, it was just me and a handful of friends, Archie Letterman, Tom Mortner, Chris Prowse, maybe Randy Pidd. And, on a good day in January, I think January is the best month of surf for Blacks. There would only be 6 or 8 of us out in the afternoon on a Santa Ana. It was glassy. It'd be 6 to 8 foot, absolutely perfect. Do you want that wave? Oh no, I got a wave. You take it. That's what it was like in the beginning.
How old were you the first time you surfed it?
Well, I think I was 15. I think.
Okay.
14. I just turned 15.
Okay.
And then after I surfed it, I walked back and there was La Jolla Shores Market, which is a little neighborhood grocery store. I always got my junk food there. Okay. And they had a little magazine stand. And I noticed Surfer Magazine. And there's a guy on the cover. He's going left and the wave looked pretty darn good. And I opened it up. and it was blacks. And I had no idea that it was a world-class wave. And Bill Andrews had the first cover in 65, I think.
Okay.
And later on in life, I ended up working for Bill, and he was a goofy foot. The next cover was, Dickie Moon. And I got to know Dickie too later on. But I said, wow, I mean, it's world famous, but there's hardly anybody out. Partially because of the walk,
Yeah.
There was a road, but what the locals did is they parked up on the bluff above North Peak.
Okay.
There weren't no houses in that bluff.
Yep.
And we'd park there, we'd check it out. If it was good, we'd scramble down, and you had to know the path. Every once in a while somebody made a wrong turn and you got stuck. We just laughed at them. We didn't offer to help. We just laughed at them. And, lifeguard helicopter.
Had to figure it out.
Yeah, lifeguards would come, a helicopter would be like, it was hysterical. If you knew your way down, it would take 3, 4, maybe 5, less than 5 minutes to get to the bottom.
How was the hike up?
Well, depending on how long you surfed, it was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
But, it was like maybe
You're young
7 or 8
fit.
minutes, yeah. And, that's how we got down there for a couple of years. And then, but Irwin Goshen, I think, had built the house out there. That kind of bummed us out. But by then I had a key.
Okay. How'd you get the key?
One of my good friends in high school was Dave Saltman. And his father was Paul Saltman, who was the chancellor of Revell. And Paul lived in the farms, and he happened to surf. He was bigger than me.
Wow.
But he was a great guy. And he's chancellor at Revell. He was a biology professor, but he's also chancellor. Dad see Dave down there, and I see Paul, and I made Paul some boards. I think that's how I got my first key.
Okay.
It's one thing to have a key. There are a lot of bootleg keys. Eventually, you had to have a pass, and they changed the lock. They made the key more sophisticated.
Right.
Pretty hard to copy, but
Everyone was broing each other out.
Yeah.
And giving the tickets.
Yeah.
You're surfing blacks all the time. Do you remember the very first big swell where it was kind of heavy?
Yeah.
How was that?
And
did you realize it was that big and heavy? Or was it?
No. Because the first time I surfed the canyon sets, it blew my mind.
Wow.
The canyon sets are different from,
Yep.
up to about maybe 6 foot, 7 foot. It doesn't start to hit the ledge of the canyon until it's about 7 foot. And when it's that big, the waves come in fast and they're steep, and it's a whole different animal.
So what was the first time like?
I was pretty scared. I mean, the biggest waves, I think I had surfed. I got my first taste of, it would be south swells, and then it shifted to northwest swells. And yeah, I got my first taste of some, north swell blacks. And then, in November, you might get a deep south. I mean, we've had deep souths in February, I think, really steep, long distance souths. And that's different because you get a Chubasco south, and the wave kind of runs up the beach in its sections, and that's all you can do to chase each section and make the wave. But on the southern hemis, you have the road, and then you have maybe the North Peak. And the North Peak is probably the bigger of the two, but the road is when it's the southern hemi, or if it's the right direction northwest, you take off even slightly south of the road. And you can, I remember watching Rex Huffman once. He was a kneeboarder. He got barreled from the takeoff of the road. And of course, the angle, it looks like you're in a barrel because it's going away from you. But it seemed like he was barreled for 200 yards, and I got waves like that too. And that was, North Peak was big. I surfed it, 12, 15 foot. But my favorite wave is the road. And, you get to know it, and you just, not even south. It's the road, and the road is, sometimes there's 3 peaks. There's the road is kind of peaky. There's a middle peak and there's a north peak. I love the road. I drive or walk down the bottom of the road, and I just paddle. I just ease my way out. Because the wave didn't really start breaking until, unless it's an exceptional swell, it didn't start breaking until slightly north of the road. But, south of the road, you just paddle out at your leisure. There might be a set that you have to, go under or two, but they're not as big as outside. And so I'd leisurely paddle out, and when a set would come, everybody start paddling north. I'd start paddling southeast.
Okay.
Because I knew,
you knew.
I knew, and
you're surfing blacks a lot. You're different swells, directions, and you're a shaper at this point. At a certain point, Do you have different boards shaped for different swells?
Well, in the early days, I only really had, first few years, I only had one board. And after the experience with the Brandon, Joey Cabell won the Sunset Contest on that big ski board, the big, narrow, thick board, the Lots Rocker. And I had the Bridgman brothers, who lived up in, up La Jolla Scenic, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they lived up there. They actually lived on Starlight Drive, which is the name of my first surfboard brand. But, Dan Bridgman was a shaper and Paul Bridgman was a glasser. And, they had a big house and they're good surfers. Dan, they're both like 4'2". But Dan was an exceptional surfer. I think he surfed his blacks, and he would get in the barrel and stay in the barrel, and he shaped his own boards. And Paul was his older brother. Paul ended up becoming like a brain surgeon or something, a heart surgeon back in the East. And Dan was an artist, a visual artist. Okay. I told Dan about this, the Joey Cabell board, and so he shaped me one. And it worked pretty good in the winter, but it was just way too gunny for smaller days. Yeah. And then Wayne Lynch came into my life. There was a shop in PB, and they had Wayne Lynch models, from Australia. Mm-hmm. And I just was in awe because they're basically eggs in the early days. And I even had my first Wayne Lynch knockoff, kind of a double-ender, the same colors as Wayne's board. It was green and yellow with the two logos in the middle, just in front of the middle of the board. Wow. And in hindsight, the board wasn't that good. But back then, I swear to God, I just let my hair grow long, like Wayne, the bowl, the hair. Right. You put a bowl in your head and you trim it maybe, but long hair. I'd throw up my hands on bottom turns and then cut back, so I'd throw up my hands. And there was a handful of other guys in La Jolla and Claremont that had the same, I won't say fascination or obsession with Wayne. But I rode that board for about 6 months, and then there was a shaper at La Jolla High, Dan Evans, who's just a local garage guy. And I asked him, I kind of want to shape a board. And he goes, yeah, we do one together. He was very experienced. He had about 20 or 30 boards. Wow, yeah. And Mitch's was full steam by then. And so went to Mitch's. And I think we bought a second blank for like $15. And we bought, we got all the resin and cloth in a box for another $15. We made the fins. It was a twin fin. It was a 6'3". Wow. And that was fall of 69. And that was the first board.
That was your shape?
I partially shaped it.
Oh,
yeah.
it was team effort.
We shaped it together, yeah.
Yeah. Rad.
And
who got to ride it first?
Oh, I rode it. It was too big for him. Okay. But it was a 6'3". It was a 6'3". That's the shortest board I ever had. Really? Yeah. Interesting. Well, I was 6'3" and 200 pounds when I was 10. I've always been a pretty big guy. My father was 6'7". Whoa. And he was built like a pro football player. Wow. But he never did any sports in his life. He was a mathematician. Wow. He'd go for walks, and that was it.
So actually, with you being a big boy, a big man too later on, did that help surfing, or did it hamper your surfing?
It's kind of a mixed bag because, on that twin fin, I got pretty good on it, and we had like the high school championships. Southern Colorado, and it was at Blacks, and I remember I think I got second. So I was like, killer. I got a shot of me doing a backside off the lip where I'm completely vertical like Wayne, and later that year, I thought I'd try my hand at a pro contest. Or no, maybe, I think I was just wrapping up high school. And it was a pro contest in Huntington Beach. And the first heat, I had, guys that were in the magazine and stuff. Right. And I thought I got every good wave. And I came in, it was a 5-man heat, and I got fourth. Oh. And that's when I realized, you know what? I'm too big to be a pro surfer. Yes. I am. It's just a fact, because all the, there's been exceptions, Simon, but I have pictures of me next to Simon. I'm bigger than Simon. Are you? Yeah. Who's taller? Wes Lane? Wes is my height piece. He had a lighter frame. Wes weighed 180, 185 pounds. Yeah. But Wes is my height.
Now the waves are in better condition, so some of the guys are a little bigger.
Yeah, all these Brazilians and stuff are 140 pounds, 45 pounds. Right. And so that, as a first board, I had a hand in shaping, and we made the fins. And, twin fins had become the rage, kind of Rolf Furnez and Corky Carroll. But I had my own ideas on how the twin fins should be shaped. I got a couple boards from Randy Pidd, who was a La Jolla shaper. He ended up being a chef in New York. Great surfer, though. And I went to UCSD in the fall of 71, and I lived in the dorms. And back then, all they had was Revell, and Muir was pretty brand new. And I don't know if Third College had been started yet, but you had to live in the dorms your first year, which was a bummer because it was right above blacks. I had always been an A student until I started surfing, and I started surfing. And I was like an A- B+ student. But that year, I
struggled at school.
I struggled at school. But I met Elliot Rabin, who his father had a plastics company called Riddell Plastics, and so we started making surfboards together. Starlight, Elliot lived
and going to school.
Yeah, right. Towards the end of that time.
Okay,
and Elliot took me on my first trips to Baja. We used to surf 38.5, and it was a big flat mesa. Mm-hmm. And Gus Cota had a house on the entrance, but basically it was a big empty lot. And you'd park up there, and you walk down the cliff and surf this. It was a pretty good point. It wasn't an A+ point, but it was a pretty good point, and not very crowded. But yeah, we made, I don't know, maybe 150 to 100 Starlights.
Wow.
And then
and who was buying these? All were there students or
friends.
local kids? Yeah, all the local guys.
I wouldn't charge them anything to shape. I would charge them minimal money to shape.
Right. Cost kind of.
Yeah, The next time it came along, and I wanted to get a job at PB Surf Shop, and Bill Andrews was the manager. I just hung out in there, but I'd hang up clothes, I'd organize the boards, and after, I don't know, 3-4 weeks, Bill goes, "Fuck, I guess I got to start paying you because you're working and all my employees aren't working." And that's kind of when I met Gary Keating and Tim Lynch and Tony Staples was from Claremont, but he was probably the best surfer, in town for a couple of years.
Wow.
Goofy Foot. I think he was a U.S. champion one year. I'm not sure.
Wow. Okay.
I got to know those guys, and then later that summer, I think I got, they were so busy out, the factory on the marina. Somebody told them I shaped, and so I got a part-time job, when they're busy in the spring and summer. I didn't have a room until late afternoon. The room I got to use, I forget exactly whose it was, but it was right next to Skip Fry, and I became good friends with Skip Fry, and I tried some of his boards, but I learned a lot about Skip, especially about sanded finishes, because back then, pretty much all the boards were glossed. Skip never had a gloss. And the first time I tried a sanded finish, I could tell a huge difference in the way it ran through the water.
Wow.
And, depending on how fine the finish is. And when I got back on a gloss board, it felt like it wasn't connected to the water. And I learned a lot about fins from Skip, too, because he had lots of fins, different sizes, different shapes, rake, and they're all 4-ounce layups.
Okay, yeah.
Back then, fins were 6, 8, 10-ounce layups. Nobody cared about flex. You cared about what they look like, Okay, yeah. So in the 4-ounce, you have about 30% more layers, and you can control the foil more, and you can have a flex pattern, pretty close to exactly what you envisioned or wanted. And, Skip and I surfed together sometimes, and, Skip I learned a lot from. Mike Eaton was a shaper. Binga just gave GNS the license to do the Bonzers, I think, and Mike Eaton was shaping them. And, Mike was a fairly well-respected shaper, even in Hawaii. He made guns for, like, Jeff Hackman, I think, but I had him make me a Bonzer, and, Campbell Brothers, but I didn't like it. It tracked. It just, all I wanted to do was run. Okay. It'd run up high. When I tried to break the line, it fought me. And, it makes sense because it has those big runners, But later in life, I've included Venturi channels in some of my best-selling models, and people can feel them and they love them, but the fin setup is different.
What period is this? Is like early 70s?
Yeah, late 71, 72, 73, 74.
You consider yourself a shaper at this point, like full time kind of thing?
I thought it was pretty good, and I had my own ideas when I was at GNS, and Larry, he was pretty popular brand at that time.
course.
And, I was younger and I thought I had fresher ideas, and, I'd shaped the GNS models the way they're supposed to be shaped, like, Magic, I think, or some other models, but I shaped my own boards slightly differently. And, I tried, a couple of Mike Eaton's boards, and, Skip's board, I wrote them. I kind of liked their, it's this very distinct style of surfing. It's Skip style.
Yeah.
And to this day, it's still Skip style, but,
Right.
He's got a big following. And, so right around that time, I'd met, Mike Coteau.
Okay.
And Mike, I want to call him a genius, but he was a kid. He was like a child. He was big. He was big. He was bigger than me in the upper body. He was huge. And he was a very bright guy, but he's very temperamental. But we worked together for a little while. In fact, he was one of the first times I had a real shaper planer in my hands. He had this label. I remember going to the library in PB together, and he said, I got this idea for a label called Mars Orange. And so we got books. We started looking at pictures of Mars,
Okay.
the red planet. He goes, no,
Yeah.
Mars Orange. And then he moved up to Santa Cruz. And
So this whole period, most of your boards are in San Diego, right? Most people that ride your boards.
yeah, I'm kind of my
Are your boards migrating?
Well, yeah, in my senior year, my junior year of high school at La Jolla High, I started to become a pretty good surfer, started getting over and hang with Margot Godfrey, for God's sake, she was a world champ. And Tom Ortner was like her mentor. But my parents announced to me, like, it was like Christmas 1970. It was anyway my junior year. It was Christmas. Then my father announced he had taken a guest chair at the Navy postgraduate school in Monterey.
Oh,
That's the only migraine headache I've had in my life. I lost my shit. All my
like
friends,
stress?
my surf, my girlfriend. I was like, "You kidding me?" And but and somebody said I was a basketball star, and so I played basketball in high school. I thought the football players were idiots, but I played basketball.
So you were a jock.
I was, kind of a semi-jock.
All right.
No, I don't think I was a jock, but I was tall and I was athletic, and so I agreed to play basketball in 10th grade at La Jolla. And then when I moved up to Carmel, I was the starting center up there, and I did okay, but I think that's when I first started smoking pot too.
Monterey?
In Carmel, my parents had a house about 1 mile on the road to Carmel Valley, and it was cool. High school was pretty cool because there was all the cowboys, and they'd wear blue jeans and it's one of the checkered
Like
flannel shirts and hats, and they'd have a gun in the back window of their truck.
Oh, wow.
And,
different times.
They're good, but they're cool guys,
Heck
And then
yeah.
there was a surf crowd, and then there was the stoner crowd, and we all got along. And so I finished 11th grade in Carmel High. And I surfed, Carmel Beach, and on the weekends I go up and surf Santa Cruz, like the river mouth. It wasn't always good, but when the sand was right, it was good. And then, sometimes I go up above maybe 4 Mile, and, I enjoyed it. It was, if I had to live anywhere, that would, that's not such a bad place. But,
Right. Were you making friends up there too? Like surfer friends?
Yeah. Tim Watts, who later became, he moved to Indonesia a couple years later. Okay. And he became a big fabric supplier to the U.S. Surf clothing industry. Okay. And Cross Brothers, Ricky and Mark, and they're all very good surfers, but they're cool.
Were they open? Like, Santa Cruz is known for being this local kind of hub.
I didn't really spend much time in Santa Cruz. I lived in Carmel and surfed Carmel Beach on the week, or halfway up to Santa Cruz. There was
like Moss Landing or something?
Moss Landing, yeah. But it's kind of like Blacks, it'd kind of blow out around 11 or 12 o'clock.
Yeah,
if I got up there early enough, remind me a lot of Blacks. And then...
was there a crowd?
It was kind of crowded because it was a pretty good wave, and it was, pretty well known. Mm-hmm. I think that's when I ate my first avocados, too. It was all avocado ranches. We had roadside stands where you can get, 10 avocados for $1 or
right.
so. But I took that twin fin that I shaped and I surfed it up in Carmel that winter. And that's where I actually met Jock Sutherland. I was out.
Oh, wow.
And they had a camp up there. What's it called? Fort Ord, yeah. And I saw this jarhead take off on a wave, and I went, oh, my God. And he took off goofy foot. He kind of wobbled, and he did his backside turn, and as he come to the face, he switched hands to regular foot, and he got barreled, and he almost came out. And his board washed up to me, and I grabbed the board, and I started pushing it out to him. And I looked at him, and I went, and he was shaving, Yep. Well, it wasn't, the jock in the magazines. It was shaving. He goes, damn, that was my first wave in 8 weeks. Because in basic training.
Yes.
And, later in life, I got to become very good friends with him. And, he still gets boards from me. So, yeah.
So you have this time in Carmel. You make
and I worked at a golf course that summer. Maintenance. I got to drive a tractor. Yeah,
cool.
And then when the senior year started, my mom and I got to drive, down the coast highway and drop me off at La Jolla. I was living with friends of a family, and I was so psyched to be back to my girlfriend, my first true girlfriend, Janet Stark. She had fucking started dating one of my best friends.
Of course.
Oh, really? But it didn't take too long, and I met another wonderful girl, Cheryl Bratlian, who I dated for 5, 6, 7 years. At the beginning of the senior year, I'd been accepted to UCSD.
Which is down the street.
Which is like a mile from my house, my parents' house. And, I started smoking pot. And it was kind of more of a relaxed senior year, Debbie Beecham, Debbie Melville Beecham she was a great surfer, and, we'd surf together and show up at second or third period.
All tired.
Yeah, we had German class, and that was like third period. And Frau McMichael, she'd look at us, and our hair was still wet.
Yeah.
She'd just make a face and roll her eyes. So that was my senior year.
When does shaping start consuming your life more?
Well, after that first board with Dan Evans,
you were hooked?
I was hooked. Yeah. And then, I had to finish high school.
Of course.
And, I got boards from the Bridgemans, a few boards from the Bridgemans. And then, I started shaping some of my own boards, but I still got boards from other people. Got boards from quite a few shapers the first few years, just to,
try them out?
Try them out, because everybody's got a little different style.
Right. What'd you learn from them?
Well, a lot of them had a hard time relating to my size. And
that's true.
Back then,
I can see that.
I was tall. I was 6'3.5", 6'4", but I was a little bit leaner. I was 185, 190 pounds. But most shapers, they're the average sized person, and they
doesn't translate.
It doesn't. I feel very strongly about it that there's not many. There's a lot of great shapers out there, but there's not many that can translate boards in true perspective.
Okay.
Scale. There you go. Thank you, John. For guys much over 200 pounds, 210, and it's like. I'm making boards for Tom Stone, who's a legendary Hawaiian surfer, North Shore surfer. And he's got this son, Kavika, who's 6. And he's like a lot of big guys. He's 6'5". Wow. And he was 240 with size 14 feet, but now he's dropped 20 pounds. But he's 18 years old. And he wants to ride a small board like everybody else does.
Okay. That's a big kid.
Yeah.
A man now, I guess.
Yeah. But
wow. Let me ask you this. I never thought of this question until right now. Does it matter what size your feet are? I guess it would. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. It's leverage.
Yeah, of course. I never thought about that. You're always looking at the weight and the size of how tall someone is?
Yeah. If they got really big feet, you can't make them a real narrow board.
What size? He says size 14 foot?
Yeah, like me.
Holy cow. You have a 14 foot?
Wow. But I've been making big guy boards since the beginning, and And now the in fashion thing is mid lengths, and I got to train my people here that the mid length to me is a board between 7 and 8 feet long, and it's a kind of a high performance, fun board. It's not a big guy board. Big guys need more volume, more width, longer. And I have an interesting story. I met Jim Cartland, who's from the East Coast. He was finished second, I think, in 1973 or 74 U.S. championships held in Florida. I met him, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago, because he had moved out here and he moved up to Central Coast, and he's a cardiologist. He's a doctor. He's a ecologist, Dr. Jim Cartland. And so, I started making him boards, and he's still 170 pounds and 5'10". He rides 5'10s that are 28 liters. And, a couple of years ago, he's at my age too. He turned 70 this year. A year and a half ago, 2 years ago, he goes, Rusty, I need something for the crummy, mushy, spring days up here in Central Coast. I said, well, how about a not so moby fish? He goes, what? I go, what? It's, just try one. And he goes, well, what's it like? Well, you should probably get like a 6'6", and, probably be about 21 inches wide. He goes, oh, really? I said, just try one. Mm-hmm. And so he got it, a couple of months later. And, I called or emailed him. I go, well, what do you think of the board? He goes, well, I'm not sure. And a week later, he emailed me back and he goes, the board works pretty good.
Yeah.
And then another week goes by and he goes, I like this board.
Yeah.
I really, and then about 4 weeks later, he goes, I'm going to Tavarua in a couple of months. Do you think you could stretch that not so moby fish out? I go, yeah, sure. So I've been a 6'9", kind of a step up, not so moby fish.
Wow.
And he says, that's all I run in Tavarua.
Wow.
He's still a great surfer, but, as you get older, following your friend, man, don't fight it.
100%.
What makes you happy? More waves.
That's right.
You go out for 2 hours, you get 2 waves, you're pissed off. All these younger guys are catching waves all around you. Don't fight it, man. Just phone with your friends,
Let me ask you a question about mid-length boards, what your thoughts are. I'll tell you what my thoughts are. They help you get into the waves a little earlier, but you can still ride them and they can kind of still turn.
Yeah, you can turn them.
And you don't have to transition to a longboard when it's 2 foot, 3 foot.
Yeah, now there's something in the middle. You guys that call 6'6" mid-lengths. I go, sorry, it's not really a...
Yeah.
But the mid-lengths, the most popular ones are like twin fins or quads, and kind of have a little bit narrower nose, a little bit lower entry, but they have good tail rocker, and you can turn them.
Yeah.
And people are surprised. I've got I call him test pilot, but I got a test pilot with C. Tristan Soloway, and he's 6'4" and 185 pounds, and his go-to shortboard is our 6'0" to 6'1", 6'3", but I made him a 7'3" lowrider, and it blew his mind.
Yeah. Sometimes people get closed-minded. A lot of us do.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
There you go.
They know more than they know.
There you go. You're probably right.
And I've got all kinds of good stories about that too.
If they're coming and talking to you and you're giving them insight, and it seems like they take it, they learn from it, and because it's your business.
I had this expression, talk to your shaper. We even made a T-shirt, but and I've had lots of shapers over all the years, but I got Hoy Runnels and Rick Hammond, who I think are world class, and Rick made one called the Express, which is similar.
Wow.
And
the problem is, if everyone gets a mid-length board, you're really not. It's going to really be a fight for waves.
Yeah.
So actually, Rusty, why don't let's go backwards a little bit. Your parents.
Yes. Well, my parents are both from back east. My father, his parents were both German, and he spoke fluent German.
Was he first generation?
I think his parents were from Germany,
okay,
if I'm correct. And they lived in Brooklyn. He grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Incredibly smart person. He went to like a technical high school.
Okay.
He enlisted, I think, in the Army Corps of Engineers, and I think he spent some time in, I want to say the Philippines or something, doing surveying. And this is like, he was born in December, I think it was like birthday was like December 29th, right after Christmas, 1927. Yeah, he graduated from MIT.
Your dad graduated from MIT?
Yeah.
So he's like a genius.
He was an incredibly bright man. He's considered by his colleagues as basically a genius. So he graduated from MIT, and then he did a couple of summers out on this island. That's where he met my mom,
Okay.
Eleanor.
Yeah, what was your dad's name?
His name was Rudolph William. You know, my mom was a waitress there. Was working with older colleagues, and Scripps had a branch. They did, they collect whatever they got together for meetings and talks on Lake Winnipesaukee. So he met her, and then they got married in 1952 and drove out here. He finished his doctorate degree last year here with Scripps. He was really interested in long-range weather prediction. And it was, his work was, as I say, is brilliant. He loved science fiction. He was a genius math professor.
Yeah.
But he loved science fiction, and that's kind of where I got I started. Probably doesn't ever heard of Tom Swift, but he was a kind of a white bread boy and had a girlfriend, and he had another guy friend, and it was the four of them and their adventures, and there's like 35 episodes of Tom Swift's adventures. But
wow.
They're futuristic,
Yes, yeah.
And so, when I was old enough, we ended up in Serra Mesa when I was about 3 or 4 years old. Mm-hmm. We lived in like Navy housing and stuff down off of Marina, and I barely remember that, but I remember moving to Fireside Avenue in Serra Mesa, which these days is overlooking 163. Yeah, runs down the canyon. The other side of the canyon is like a hospital in June.
Yeah, where the Grady's at and all that.
And the juvenile hall.
Oh, yes.
I always minded my behavior because I didn't want to end up over in juvenile hall. But we moved to, Serra Mesa. I used to like to walk down that canyon, go down into the valley and down into Mission Valley and like catch snakes and lizards and
wow,
catch crawdads and fish or bass or whatever. It was all farms back then.
That's so cool.
I don't even think Westgate Park was built. But eventually the Padres, their minor league team, had a park in Mission Valley, and then slowly it started to get built up. But anyways, my mom was a physical therapist. She also did side jobs. Like we had a lot of black and white photography, like for the service, and so she got paid $1 a picture to photo tint, to colorize pictures for the military. And they both worked hard, and so I think it was 66. Fall of 66, we moved to La Jolla. My father had scrimped and saved, and they were both very modest, but they bought a beautiful brand new house on the hill up above La Jolla Shores.
Wow.
So he could walk to work.
That's cool. So he didn't care the beach was there. It was convenience.
He did. He never went to the beach. My mom would take us down to the beach, but when we lived in Serra Mesa, my mom would take us down to the shores occasionally, or Scripps. His first new car was a black Volkswagen Beetle, 1961. And he took immaculate care of that thing. But anyways, my parents were wonderful. And
you have this scientist dad, basically, right?
Yeah.
And your mother is a physical therapist working also.
Yeah.
What were their thoughts?
She's an occupational therapist, yeah.
What were their thoughts of their kid with this new... Probably started off as a hobby, but it became an addiction of surfing. Yeah. and especially in the 70s, late 60s.
Yeah,
when you're
66,
surfing.
67, yeah.
Surfers were looked down upon.
Pretty much, yeah. Like deadbeats and stuff.
Right. What were their thoughts?
Well, I mean, there was also this underground health movement, not maybe when I started in 66, but 67, 68, guys are starting to they're doing drugs, but they're meditating and eating health foods. And basically, I think they watched my body transform from a big geeky, baseball player to, most surfers that are regular surfers, they have pretty, Jen says it's the best bodies, big shoulders, narrow waist, blah, blah, blah. And, I was a good student. I slipped a little bit. I was always an A plus student. I slipped like A minus, Had a girlfriend when I was 15, Janet. And, if I wasn't surfing, I was with her. I was doing homework. So I was a pretty good kid. I didn't get in that much trouble.
Okay. So they weren't overly concerned.
Yeah. In the meantime, my dad, he liked doing research, but he was a good teacher too. So UCSD kept giving him more and more classes to teach, and he was really over it. He wanted to, research, do papers, books. Well, I was halfway through 11th grade, and at Christmas they announced they're moving to Carmel in a couple of weeks.
Right. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, a little deeper?
It was a wonderful experience. I took the first board that I co-shaped with, with Dan Evans, that little 6'3" twin fin up there, and that's where I officially met Jock Sutherland. Just finished Camp Ord, or what it was, Fort Ord. Boot camp. I saw his first wave out of boot camp.
Yep.
I made lots of friends up there, but, my heart was back in La Jolla.
Let me ask you this. What changed about you? Did anything change when you leaving La Jolla to go to Carmel to come back? Were you a different person?
Well, I think, I don't think I smoked pot when I was in La Jolla. I think I smoked my first joint up in Carmel, and I remember I came home one night, and I started rummaging through the refrigerator. It was about, 12 o'clock at night. I think I woke my father up, and he came out, and we ended up having an eating contest. I don't know if he knew I was stoned, but we had an eating contest. But shortly after I moved back to La Jolla, I found out that my father was just, he only had a year, whatever it's called, at Navy postgraduate school.
Yeah.
Up there. And he had taken a job with NOAA in Hawaii.
Oh.
On the South Shore. And they had purchased a house on the Vili Vili Street, which is the base of Coco Head Crater. It's, in the summertime, there's a Portlock Point, which is a pretty long, big point. Basically a point wave on the South Shore. If I look directly west, I could see Diamond Head. Okay. And there were a couple other spots. And as soon as I graduated I went over for Christmas when I was in 12th grade. That was there on the South Shore, but I immediately started exploring the whole island. Surfed the North Shore for the first time.
Did you know people out there at the time?
No, I wasn't connected to anybody really. I was just, I went over by myself at Christmas, but I explored, and then I went over and I spent the whole summer after I graduated there before I went to my first year at UCSD. Okay.
Did you make friends then?
I made a few friends. I had some of my friends from La Jolla come visit me and stay with me for a while. I had a job on the South Shore at a pretty big famous restaurant. I forget what the name is, but I was thinking I was a busboy for a couple months.
Okay.
Whenever I could borrow my dad's car, I'd go surf Ala Moana or surfed Ala Moana. I saw Michael Ho.
Okay.
He was a couple years younger than me, and he was a little grom, and he had this. They had like these lockers for the boats.
Okay.
And he would put his stuff. I don't know whose locker it was. He'd find an empty locker and put his stuff in and go out and surf.
Did Michael Ho have talent at the time?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I think the mini Hoonie contest at the shores, I think he came over for 1 year. You have to be 14 or under, I think, for that contest. But,
okay.
My parents lived on the South Shore for a few years, and I went to UCSD that first year, and I had to stay in the dorms. As close as you could be to blacks without living in the farms.
Right. A little bit more about Hawaii and your first trip over there visiting your parents.
Yeah.
What did you think of the waves there compared to La Jolla or blacks or what you were surfing?
The winter waves are bigger, more powerful, maybe more disorganized. Like I'd gotten plenty of good blacks over those first few years.
Yeah. And
as I said, blacks is a world-class wave. And when it starts to hit the ledge of the canyon, it's insane. Mm-hmm. The North Shore, I'd read about it and heard about the power and everything, but it was a little bit messy. And then the South Shore waves, the summer waves were, a lot cleaner. Like Ala Moana is a pretty good wave. Yeah. And that's where I mostly surfed. I surfed up the west side a couple of times. I learned to go early because the locals wouldn't come out first thing in the morning. They'd wait till about 10:30 when the offshore started to blow. And
So
then
you
they'd
split
show up.
then. Yeah.
I get a couple more waves and I go, fuck, time to get out of the water.
Where was the talent level of you versus them?
Well, I was...
You were a good surfer.
I was a good surfer. I was, especially for a bigger guy.
Yeah.
Locals are locals.
That's 100%. You'll leave it at that?
Yeah. That's a lesson I learned pretty quickly. I'd surf new break and stuff, and those guys, there's a lot of attitude down there. There probably still is, but, Wind and Sea used to have a lot of attitude, but it's, in hindsight, it's not that great of a wave except a couple times a year.
Okay, actually, let's talk about that. You lived in the shores. When you went on the other side of La Jolla, were you treated differently? Or were you a local, considered a local?
Well, I was a local and I was a big guy. And I was a pretty decent surfer. And I minded my manners. I recognize that there's a pecking order at every spot.
Did you recognize the kids from school and stuff?
Yeah,
okay.
Like I said, I used to surf with Debbie Beecham and a couple other guys who were pretty good.
Did you ever get a hassle out there?
I got into a few surf hassles. Didn't last long. I don't know why they always like to pick on a big guy.
Yeah, that's stupid, right?
Yeah, that's stupid. And a big guy that's trained to fight. It's like, are you kidding me?
You were trained to fight?
I started karate when
oh boy, I didn't know that.
When I went back to school in fall of '74.
Interesting.
And some of my friends had already been training. And Fred Kenyon, he was it was called Teng Soo Do back then. It was a Korean karate, and there's a famous actor, and he's a legitimate Teng Soo Do master. And Fred, when I first started training from him, I think he was maybe second or third degree, but he surfed. Didn't take shit from anybody. I saw him, somebody cut him off once, and he paddled up to him and knocked him off his board, looked at me in the eye, flipped the board over, and did a palm heel on his fin and knocked it clean out of the board. Didn't say a word to him. And I traded with Fred, and Fred surfed, and he liked to party too. And some of my friends had started training with him a little bit earlier. So when I was back at UCSD, I started training, and I was just about ready for my black belt, and then I got so distracted with my career. But then about 10 years later, after I broke up with John at Canyon, I ran into him at Dixieline in Point Loma, and he looked at me and goes, God, you're fat. That's a pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah.
But I've been married. I got the pregnancy co-fatness, whatever it's called. And, I had a little kid, and I was just working my brains out. I go, he's fucking right. And so Master Kenyon, I forget what year, killed himself.
Oh, wow.
Well, he had a bad accident, and he was never the same, but he still instructed and stuff. But his son Damon, when I started back, he was like 12, and he was a red belt, and then Damon got his black belt, and he ended up being my instructor. I ended up, first degree and then second degree, teaching credentials. And, a lot of times when I went in, I was the senior guy, so I had to teach class. Senior guy shows up, he teaches the class.
So did you enjoy training?
I loved training, yeah.
You loved it?
I loved it. It was really, surfing's, good for your body, but the martial arts training too, it's not like Taekwondo. You do in Teng Soo Do, you do a lot of kicks, but it's a striking art. Mm-hmm. And then eventually it changed names to Subak Do, and I went to Korea a few times.
Wow, to fight
for black belt conference.
So you're legit.
Yeah, I really haven't. I don't think I've ever lost a fight in my life.
Wow, that sounds a lot.
When I was back at UC, when I started at UCSD again, I promised Dr. Solomon that I would let him down, and I had to work, and so I became a bellman at La Valencia. Mm-hmm. I had multiple episodes where it was 2 or 3 on one, but this one time I was running to go get a car because the parking lot was behind the building across the street, and I had just parked the car, and I was kind of walking back to the hotel, and this car came screeching through the parking lot. It was a couple of assholes and their girlfriends drunk. And I go, hey, slow down, man. There's a lot of old people around here. He goes, fuck you. And I go, what? And he gets out of the car, and his friend gets out of the car behind him. And I say, guys, these old people don't move fast. You got to be careful. He goes, he started to put up his hands. And I said, are you serious? He goes, boom, down. Sidekick to the head down on the ground. And I looked at his friend, and you want some too? And he just backed off. And, and I went back to the hotel, and it turned out they were coming in to eat. And they walked past me, and they didn't say anything.
No.
It's like, there's natural street fighters, but if you train for a few years,
it's a whole different level.
It's when we did testing, like, as a red belt, you had to go fight 2-on-1 at the testing.
Really?
Black belt, you had to fight 3-on-1.
No.
Fight multiple opponents. You actually go after the biggest guy first.
You got
to try to line them up. You don't let them get around you, and there's all kinds of.
That's interesting.
But anyways, I did that for a long time, but I got you get injured when you karate any level really, and and I was teaching a lot, and I love the black belt classes, which were like Wednesday nights and Saturday afternoons. But I'm still in touch with a lot of my friends that are.
Wow.
We're all old now, but
yeah,
they kept going. I was ready for my 3rd degree. For 6 weeks, you go into a everyday training program to get dialed and hopefully crush it at your test. And I did that 6 weeks training, but I just didn't have enough time on my calendar. But I wanted to train with all my other friends.
Right.
And I did everything, but I just, work was getting so crazy, and I just, I didn't want to be injured anymore, and I just didn't.
Did it help your surfing?
I think so. Yeah.
Just be in better shape.
You have to be, flexible.
Mm-hmm.
When I was, even when I was in high school, I realized you have to be, I'm a big guy, and I have to really work on my flexibility. I did a lot of stretching, but with Subak Do, I became stronger, but more flexible too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, wow. Interesting. I didn't know.
Yeah. One of my dearest friends, Pedro Batalin, he's like best friends with the Gracies.
Oh, okay.
Jorge Gracie. And Pedro, he's been with me forever. Did I tell you about him yet?
No.
He's Brazilian, and I think it was like the 3rd year I was in business. And I had my licensees, and we're having troubles with a trademark in Brazil. And he's a pretty famous pirate. He had all kinds of big brands. And, so I flew down to Sao Paulo to go to the trade show, and he introduced himself to me, and he hands me a bag of coffee. He said, I really look forward to doing business with you. And he was fucking up our business. And Pedro introduced himself to me. His mom is a very prominent attorney, and he has a law degree, but he also loves to shape and surf. And he says, I'm going to get your trademark back for you. And he did.
Oh, cool.
And then he lined us up with, the top clothing guy in Brazil, too, Adolfo.
Okay.
And the clothing guy he lined us up with had done, Quicksilver, all the big brands. He also had his own big brand. But, Pedro's one of my dearest friends, but he's like a fucking 5th degree jiu-jitsu guy. I never really, he's very cool. Once in a while you see him get mad at somebody, but we're in Tavarua, and somebody got out of line. I was going to step in, but Pedro walked up and just put him in a fucking chokehold and dropped him like he was yawning. It's like, and I haven't really seen Pedro in real action, but I've heard stories.
Did the fighting help during the time of localism in surfing? Does that make sense?
I became, I could surf anywhere, really.
Okay.
Pretty much anywhere.
Yeah. So
and even if they didn't really know me, I was bigger enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Except for this fuck-wadded blacks one time. He hadn't become friends with him, but he's a fucking idiot. Guy cuts me off. You know, this is I'm in my prime. I don't know, was I late 20s? I think, or my early 30s. He cuts me off once and didn't say anything, and then he cuts me off again, and I caught up to him and I just punched him. And he came up and he was like, and you know, I remember after he cut me off the first time, I said, what are you thinking? He goes, go back to fucking Claremont, which is like the biggest insult you could see. Somebody from La Jolla.
Right.
You know, although there's a lot of great surfers from Claremont. He goes, go back to fucking Claremont, you kook. And I just looked at him.
What?
And it turns out he was friends with one of my shapers, Steve Bartow. His name was Bill Botten. Well, anyways, he shows up in my office and he says he's filed a lawsuit against me.
For you hitting him?
And I fucking laughed and I said, get the fuck out of my office. That's the last I heard from him. And I think I've had a couple other incidents where people figure out who I am.
Right.
You know, they try and, bluff or blackmail me or something.
But I mean, you're one of the guys at Black's, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there localism at Black's amongst your crew?
Oh, there kind of was. You know, by the time, I don't know, like 1969, 1970 rolled around, the Orange County guys started to figure out that Black's
is good.
Good, when on a south swell and especially on a north swell, which kind of goes past Orange County. Mm-hmm. And it hits.
Yeah, because the island blockage, the Catalina and stuff. At that point, you guys decide we need to kind of regulate this?
Well, Black's is the kind of way where you can cut somebody off and they're fucked, and you keep going until the next person cuts you off. It's a long wave. There's only room for really one person on the wave when it's good. Mm-hmm. But over time, it just disintegrated. One time, it was kind of locals, and into my later years, I still had some respect, but I mean, there's so many people out. I mean, there's on an average day, there's 300 people out. That's
crazy. Does it become a dangerous wave with that many guys out?
Yeah. You watch the video.
Of course.
Watch YouTube videos. It's sometimes there's 3 or 4 drop-ins on a wave. Somebody takes off and they're spazzing, or the other guy ahead of him thinks he's better, and the other guy ahead of him thinks he's even better. And it's a
shit show.
It's a shit show. Yeah. And it's sad because when it's good, it's really. I used to take all my team riders down there, and not so much in the summertime, but if they were visiting, like say after Hawaii, like in January, mm-hmm. I took Wayne Lynch down there. That's where I met Simon Anderson. He just over here for the trade show with McNabb. He just signed a license agreement with McNabb for the thruster. It was like January '81, I think, and that's where I've taken, like I said, I took Tom Carroll down there. I've taken a lot of my team riders down there,
just to show them how good the wave was.
Yeah, I mean, there's some pretty memorable sessions.
Who was the guy at Black's? Was there a guy? Were you the guy? Was there one guy?
Well, over the years, I mean, there wasn't ever really the guy.
Okay,
but there was some standouts, and there's different types of, there's this guy, Joe Lazar. He's a big, tall guy, and he rode a big, long board, and he'd sit outside and he'd wait for the biggest wave. Mm-hmm. He didn't do much, but he got the biggest, best waves, and he was usually in the barrel.
Yeah, there you go.
So, I mean, we all knew who Joe was. I took him on some trips, the end of one.
Yeah.
At that wave, he rode his wife was dying of cancer, and she was in remission, so he took her down there. But he rode her like 8-foot wave storm.
No way.
Barrel. I made him some boards. He rode those too, but he could ride anything, and he just cruised and get in the barrel. And he was pretty much fearless. But there's other guys who are good too,
Yeah.
And the pros, sometimes the pros, they show up and, they're on a whole nother level.
Of course.
Yeah. 1979, I judged my first contest of the Blacks. A new store had opened up in La Jolla.
A new store?
Just up the street from Mitch's. And
Okay.
this guy named Guy Coleman, who was from L.A., I think, and moved down here and opened the shop up. And Debbie, Beecham was one of his team riders, and that's kind of how I met Bill Barnfield, too.
Okay.
In 79. But in that late summer, Stubby's was a big Australian.
Yes.
They used to have major, contests in Australia.
Yeah.
Well, they had trials here.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, big burly guy, he was an announcer. But, Guy was kind of helping him organize the judging crew and the contest. And Guy said, would you like to judge this contest? Because I know you surf there and you know the way, blah, blah, blah. Richard Kenman had been riding for me for years, and he almost won. So the top two finishers, Jeff, I can't remember his name, Jeff from North County won it, and Richard came a close second. And so they got tickets to go to the real Stubbies.
In Australia, Kira or whatever.
Yeah, and then I went to the awards banquet that night, and Richard was sitting with Bill Castor and Chris O'Rourke. And so I'm not going to go into my relationship with Richard Kenvan, but I've given him several chances since then.
Okay.
Yeah, it was my first contest and judging, and then I got asked to judge the OP Pro and the contest. It was pretty soon. I was a regular IPS judge.
Oh, this is IPS days.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Did you enjoy judging?
Yeah, I did. And,
Was it long days?
well, the first few years, Ian and PT and kind of the contest directors for the OP.
Yeah, they're running it, right?
Ian would have us get up at fucking 4 a.m. and set up the scaffolding the first day.
Oh, so you were hustling.
We had to set up the scaffolding. And we were on the stand all day. We get every fifth heat, we got, there's
a break.
5 active judges in one. So you had a rotation of, every fifth heat or whatever you got 20 minutes or 30 minutes off. And they were long days, but I was young and I had fun. I got to meet all the pro surfers. And
You're becoming a judge, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're also shaping boards, and you're meeting all these pro surfers.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how I met Aki.
Okay, so that's my
At
question.
the Body Glove Pro in Ocean Beach, summer of '83.
Okay, this is ASP days then, probably.
Yeah, and there's this young goofy foot, and he was really good, and he did pretty good in the contest, but I could see him struggling with his board. I already had some pretty good, darn good surfers on my boards, and even a couple of Australians like Mitch Thorson and Richard Cram had gotten a few boards from me, and
Wow.
Greg Day.
Oh yeah, I remember Greg Day. Yeah.
I approached Lucky and I said, I'd like to make you a board. And he goes, oh, that'd be sick. He was riding Jim Banks. He was riding Jim Banksy's boards.
Okay.
I could see he had a lot of potential, but he was kind of catching the edges and the board wasn't really working, to his needs. And, he did pretty good. I hadn't really heard of him before that. And so he went off to Africa, and I think he beat Sean Thompson that year in 16, that caught the world's attention. And he came back, and I gave him the board. I was judging the OP Pro too, and I gave him the board, and he said, "Oh, thanks, but I'm going to ride the board I'm used to." But he took it back to Australia. He won the Aussie Pro Junior, and then he took it to the Murray Pro in late '83, and he broke the nose off somewhere in the quarters or before the quarters. He broke about 6 or 8 inches of his nose off. And back then the surfers, they didn't travel with that many boards, so he kept riding the board, and I think he came second in that contest or equal third. But Bob Hurley, who I knew, a great guy, good shaper from Orange County, had recently taken over the billabong license here in the States, and he called me and he said, "Hey, would you mind shaping Aki a couple more boards?" I said, "Sure." And he goes, "I'll even pay for them." I go, "That's even better still."
Yeah, deal.
So I built him a couple more boards, and that started a relationship where, I think he rode my boards exclusively for a couple of years. And I heard stories of him. He was in France, and I heard one story where he kind of buried the boards at the contest site, and after the contest was over that day, he went out and did something, probably partied, I don't know.
Yeah.
And came back the next day and dug them up and used them again. That was 83 was the first boards, and I call it the 1984 model because I still was working with Canyon, but I was starting to get the itch to move on, and I was developing different types of R logos. But when I left in the fall of '85, Aki was riding my boards, and the next batch had our dots on them, and I knew Gordon Merchant. I met him. I judged Stubby's trials here in 1979 at Black's, and I met the announcer. He's a big, bold voice guy, Bob. I forget his name, but and I got invited to come judge the Stubby's the IPS contest the next year. That first year, '79, Richard Kemen came second behind North County Surfer. So the two of them went to Australia. The next year, I got invited to come judge it, and I met Gordon Merchant, and he was getting the Billabong thing going. And I knew Jack Shipley from judging and going to Hawaii. Jack was the original partner in Lightning Bolt surfboards.
Yep.
And he and Jerry had a house at Pipeline together. I met Jack, and Jack said, "I'm going to check out Gordon's clothing, and you want to come?" And I go, "Yeah, sure." And he had this, kind of, modest warehouse. I probably was about 5,000 square feet, but, in terms of clothing buildings these days, maybe 3,000 and 4,000 square feet, and maybe a dozen seamstresses, and, they're busy making clothes. And, I overheard Jack and Gordon having a conversation about two different sets of invoices, the real one and whatever the other one was.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
So I knew Gordon Merchant. Gordon was kind of cool, and and then late '85, I started the R Dot label, and my T-shirts blew up instantly.
Were they just sold in the shop, like the surf shop, or were you selling them?
Hardcore surf shops that carried the Canyons and they carried the Rusties. They bought them and they sold through them time after time again. And then I got a really big order from Pac Sun, where the buyer was a surfer I knew, his wife.
Okay.
And I go, God, she ordered 100 dozen T-shirts. And I go,
wow.
God, I don't know if I can afford that. And she goes, yeah, I know normally we pay net 30 or 60, but for you, we'll make an exception and we'll give you half up front and half when you deliver. And I went, wow, okay. And so I went to Doug Moranville over by Mitch's, and I said, Doug, I got a big order. And he said, well, how many? And I told him, he goes, oh, forget it. Fuck it. And I said, Doug, I'll help pay to move you into a bigger building because I have a feeling my T-shirt business is just getting off the ground. And he goes, nah, fuck it. he grew up in La Jolla. I think he inherited his mom's house right close by the shop, and he liked to spend his time in the Gulf fishing. And I kind of got it, but I found a different maker, and I always use the best T-shirts, and the early designs are all my designs.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how did you come up with the R?
Well, PT put together the Evolution up there. And
okay, cool.
When I left Canyon, he was actually the advertising director at Surfing Magazine.
Yes.
About a year and a half, 2 years before I left Canyon, I was really self-conscious about putting my name on the boards because it wasn't really my brand. I'd signed the blanks, but I didn't feel like I deserved a logo. And he said, "Mate, you got to put a logo on the board." And so I started with I call it the Block R. Mm-hmm. And that eventually, it became the R Dot. It was a little tiny sketch, and my last name is so long. My middle name was long, and my first name was Russell William Preisendorfer. Would that work on a surfboard? No.
Okay.
Diffendorfer, I think, is about as long a name as you can pull off. But he says, "Mate, just call him Rusty."
Yeah.
That's dumb. I was self-conscious about that. For a while, I was calling myself Russ, R-U-S, because it was a shorter first name, Russ Preisendorfer.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Russell is too long. Rusty was kind of a kid's name. They said, just call him Rusty. Rusty boards. Okay.
So you weren't being called Rusty at the time?
Oh, yeah. Everybody called me Rusty. And,
okay.
A lot of other names, too. But
I'm sure.
So yeah, that's how the R Dot developed. I had all kinds of different variations, and I had a little tiny variation. And Henry Hesser was working for K-Pro, David K at the time, and he was an early on, his father, he had an electronics business, and Dave stumbled across the first early portable laptop. I think he was right behind Microsoft. I think he was ahead of the Apple curve. And so Henry was a pro skater, and he was a pro surfer at one time too. And he has some artistic sensibilities, but he said, let me fool around with it. And so he took the little R and he blew it up on the stat machine. showed it to me. I go, yeah, that's it.
All right.
So he likes to take credit for designing it. I designed it, but he blew it up, and made it, kind of. So that was it. That was the art dog. And, all those subsequent T-shirts I designed. All artists borrow.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Their inspirations, you got to get them from someplace. So.
Okay.
But, some of them were pretty original. And the first one, the bleed, I call it the bleed. It's still popular today.
The Aki era, Aki's getting on your boards.
Mm-hmm.
Surfing's changing, right? IPS to ASP.
Yeah.
And is surfing is getting more progressive?
Yeah. There's airs stuff, the early airs.
Yeah.
I think what a Santa Cruz surfer in the late 70s was given a lot of credit for kind of popular, being the first real air guy.
There was a Davey Smith guy. Remember that guy from Santa Barbara?
Yeah, Davey was a fairly progressive surfer, but he was small.
And Bud Lamas?
Bud was Huntington, but
I don't know that.
Herbie Fletcher's kid.
A Christian?
Christian was the early air guy. But anyways, so the T-shirt business started to grow. And, a couple of years later, it was really big.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tell Gordon was getting itchy, but, when we launched the apparel, I think it was January 87 or January 88, Gordon said, that's it.
Took them off your boards, Aki?
And he said, and Luke Egan was riding my boards at that time too, and several other Billabong team riders. He goes, I don't care if he doesn't even sign the boards. If I find out you're riding one of his boards, you're off.
So everything changed.
Everything changed. And Sean Thompson spat the dummy too at that trade show. He goes, bro, what are you doing? Because he had Instinct at the time.
Right.
And I had virtually all of his team riders on my boards. And so the shit started to hit the fan after that first trade show.
So they wanted to keep you in this box of just being a shaper.
Well, as a shaper, great. With a T-shirt line, okay. But the T-shirt line was starting to blow up and, became like one of the number one brands in surf shops and specialty stores.
Yeah.
And so they're getting nervous. And then we launched the clothing line. And, the first clothing line, I was tripping because, some of the samples were complete. They had to, tape paper logos on the shorts and stuff. They didn't care. All the shops just had to have it, and that, one by one, Instinct, Gordon dropped out of Billabong Instinct, and, Quicksilver hung in there for a while. There's a couple of covers of Jeff Booth and some other Quicksilver guys.
Before they pulled them off your boards?
And pretty soon, a lot of the good surfers that were getting boards from me, couldn't get boards anymore, but we were starting to do enough business to where we could start having our own team. And, it kind of flip-flopped because we had guys on our for a brief period, there was guys like Robbie Bain who rode for Hot Tuna, I think, but he rode my boards.
Yes.
And
Bainey's been on the show.
But then, by the late 80s, so Aki's long gone, and he kind of went through depression. He got fat and everything, but then he made a comeback and he won the title in
99. I'm guessing 99. That's my guess.
He was the 99 world champion. You're right.
I don't know.
Years went by, and the marketing guys in Australia said, "Why don't we do?" Because I had the 84 model, which was based off of Aki's,
that turn,
kind of based off of his early boards.
Yeah.
Why don't we do a limited edition of 100 boards? So in 2014, I signed a deal with Aki. We did 100 boards, and it's called the 84, and it's got an R dot on it, which didn't come until a couple of years later. But the board sold out in 2 days.
Wow! How stoked are you?
Well, I was stoked. We gave Aki, $100. We gave him $100 a board or something, so we got $10,000 out of the deal. I was stoked.
Yeah.
He came here. He got a board, rode it at the Trestles contest, and. My son met Aki on a boat trip, and it was a Billabong boat trip. And he was trying to get Aki drunk, but Aki outdrank him, and he got wasted.
So let's go back in the 80s when Aki and all these guys, Thorson, all these guys are riding your boards. You're judging, you're shaping boards, and now you're starting a clothing business. How are you balancing all this?
Well, I was working,
Working your ass off, sounds like.
25 hours a day.
Right.
But after a couple of years of handling the T-shirts and the screenboard by myself, I was starting to get pulled away from the surfboards, and that was my true love. I think I told a story about Bob Skolberg, who was a pro downhill skater and competitive freak. He wanted to sell me some life insurance, and he said, I need to look at your, financial statements. And he came back the next day and he goes, holy fuck, you need a partner. And I go, no, I don't. But, and he didn't have the money. So he got the money from Al Campbell, who is Larry Gordon's cousin or something, and helped him with the Fiberflex skateboards. And Al was a cool guy. And, so I agreed to give them 25% of the apparel, and I can't remember how much, but it really wasn't that much money. I started with one building down on Santa Fe Street. They're about 2,000 square foot. And then I got a second one. And as the T-shirt business and everything, and my surfboard business grew, I got a third one. And then, Bob comes along and I agree. And he moves up here to Miramar, a little bit farther east from me now. And, they have the T-shirts. A year later, he was a GNS on the GNS team. And so GNS was doing clothing. He wooed away their clothing designer, and she was a female. She was okay, but it didn't matter. Whatever they put an R dot on. Then I remember some T-shirt designs that other people. Well, maybe I did some of them too, but they weren't that hot. They were just kind of go. We could put an R on anything and sell it.
Wow.
For a while.
What about now? All of a sudden, you're in the limelight. You're like a star.
Yeah,
your brand is a star.
Mm-hmm.
How does that feel?
I was never an ego freak, I was psyched, I was stoked, I was very proud of my work, but if an ordinary guy I'd never met before wanted to get a surfboard, I'd sit down and talk to him.
Cool, yeah.
And I'm like that still today. I mean,
yeah. You're approachable.
I call people and I go, is this really Rusty? And I go, no, Rusty's not a real person, he's like Colonel Sanders,
Well, I mean, yeah.
And I got a lot of awards in the 2000s, before 2000, between 2000 and 2010, like, Shaper of the Year, one of the best all-time shapers and stuff like that. And
also about the early Aki days, Curran's there too. So are you having competition?
Kinda
against. So, I mean, the Aki. Everyone either loved Aki or Curran.
Yeah, it was kind of a split camp.
Right.
I got to know Al. He was cool. It was like a little quiet around me, but he was cool. And then time went by and Tom started riding Morris Coles boards. And, a couple of years after I started the Rusty label, there was a lot of shapers I had respect for. And, one of them was Simon. And I think it was like 88 or 89. I approached Simon and I said, Simon, how would you feel about doing, 100 boards over here? We can do them your label, we can do a joint label, and I'll give you $100 a shape. And he was into it. I got to know Simon. He lived with me for a few weeks. I realized what a sweet, tender man he was. He had a wife and he had 2 cats, and one of his cats died when he was here.
Oh, that's sad.
And he was heartbroken.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Wow.
God bless him. He still rips. He's still a very kind, gentle person. And, he's got a very dry sense of humor.
Okay.
And, and then Morris Cole was around 93. Tom Curran blew up on Morris Cole's boards. And, I forget who introduced me, maybe Pat Rawson. But I approached Morris and he said, sure, I'll come over and do 100 boards. And he was here for 2 weeks. And Morris talks and talks and talks. Pat Rawson talks and talks and talks. Bernie Baker talks and talks and talks. But he was here, and I go, Morris, you're running out of time. You got 100 boards to shape, and I don't think you've done but 5. And so I actually had, his name was Art Collier. So Morris was kind of anti. When I first met him, it was like he was using a machine, and he said the reverse V was a fuck up. he was, hungover or something, and he shaped the board for Tom backwards or something like that. You can never know if he's serious, but so his reverse V boards were very popular. He came over here, and I remember we were all sitting around in my island in my kitchen with my kids, and Morris hand coloring his logos because everyone was unique.
Yeah.
But he had the boards programmed; they were cut, but he wasn't finishing them. And so I said, I can have Art Collier finish them. I think it was Art. Art would finish them, and Morris would sign them, and it was like he signed the last one and then sprinted off the airport and barely made his flight back to France. Later that year in the summer, I flew over and, I did some boards in France for some accounts, and I stayed with Morris. He was an interesting guy.
In this period, late 80s, early 90s, it seems like earlier in the 80s, all you business guys, I guess you became a businessman first off. Is that correct?
I knew nothing about business.
But you became one.
Kinda.
You had to, right?
Yeah, and it's like I said, like the dog gets a hold of the truck's rear bumper, and he goes, "Now what do I do?"
Right. Okay. So you figured
I
it
had
out.
to learn.
Yeah. And all these guys in the early 80s, you guys are all friends.
Shapers, I got along with most of the shapers too.
The shapers and the clothing guys.
There's a few dicks out there, but
of course.
I guess it's the sincerest form of flattery, but I had a lot of people start to do logos with dots, like Timmy Patterson, he's cool, but Tim Ferriss, no, he fucking copied my logo. And, but yeah, I was friends with most of them. I got along with most people.
But in the late 80s, all of a sudden, surf business became cutthroat. It seems like from an outside perspective.
I don't think so.
No, you guys were all still cool with each other?
I mean, I was pretty cool with most shapers. I mean, I made a lot of great friends in Hawaii. I mean, Eric Arakawa, Pat Rawson.
Maybe not shapers, I'm saying more clothing lines. When you're clothing.
Well,
people started seeing.
Yeah, because you're
a threat.
There's a lot of growth in the clothing business. And
surfing was hot back then, right?
Fluoro age was, late 80s. And then Nirvana came along and everybody became, drab.
Right. Yeah. All right, everybody. So this is Mike and Rusty, and we're out of here on this episode, and we'll be back later.
Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
Going up and down. That's when I cut my wave, knew what to do. Surf that wave right to the shore, and it's dreams come true. Fantastic sunny day, boys and girls hanging around, surfers going up and.
Hey, you guys, Endless Summer box set. This thing is legit. It's authentic, numbered certificate in it. It has a 5-frame film strip from the original print. You will literally own a piece of history. It has a specially minted bronze medallion. Dude, that thing's sick. Okay, there's so much more here. Go to the show notes. There's a link on there. Go check this piece of history out. This thing's rad. Seriously. Smithsonian American History Museum has it. It took 4 years of research with 3.5 in production, all hand assembled. This thing's rad. So much to this awesome box set. Remastered DVD. Sharper images than the original film, but dude, this thing's so sick. Link in the show notes.